Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And our last two episodes have been very busy. 2 episodes ago, we focused on the 2027 draft when we were picking the latest that we've ever picked with these Oakland A's after a surprisingly good 80 and 82 record last season. Loved the depth that we were able to get in the draft. Really like our first 10 picks, which is something I don't think I've ever said in OOTP before. It was a pretty deep draft, at least according to our scout. And we got a lot of guys that were pretty highly regarded by our scout in terms of their ceilings. First round, we'll always be following whether going with the young infielder, Mr. Ramirez, over the young knuckleballer, Mr. Rojas, was the right decision. We were hoping Rojas might fall to us in the second round. He did fall to the second round, but not quite far enough. He was picked 47th overall, and we had the 53rd pick. But still really like what we did in the draft overall. And hopefully we'll still be employed by the Oakland A's a few years from now when some of those players may be close to getting ready for the major leagues. Then in our last episode, we did a bit of a deep dive, continuing to dismantle this roster that has disappointed us mightily this year with a 42 and 62 record. We weren't necessarily expecting great things. We haven't really been able to increase our budget materially at all in this playthrough, and we really haven't been able to add any true impact players via free agency or trade. So I can't say it's shocking that we've had a rough season, but given that it has been a rough season in which we were expected to play 500 ball by our manager after the progress we made last season, we became sellers about a month ago. Within the last month and a half, we've moved on from Esteury Ruiz, Jace Barofin, Christian Pache, Greg Allen, and others. And then more recently, we've really dismantled the older players on our pitching staff, trading away closer Ian Hamilton, Gabe Spire, and Josh Spores, who were both setup men for us, and then Sean Manaea, who we brought on board as a free agent this past year to be our second starter, number 2 starter. And then we also traded away Anthony Santander, who has been our best offensive player for the last 2.5 seasons. In return, we got some prospects and we got some cash to hopefully at least let this season be a little more successful financially than we were a year ago when we lost a couple $1 million, even though on the field it's going to be pretty rough. So as we sit here on August 1st and we begin to play these last 2 months of the season, Bubba Chandler is probably the only guy we got via trades who is definitely going to have an impact, we hope, for a few years on our major league roster. We did get some prospects, no 5-star prospects, but guys who, if things go well, and if we get lucky perhaps in the development lab, and even more importantly than that, if we get lucky with some favorable talent change randomness, could become useful players for us in the majors. But Chandler's really the only one who I expect we'll see around for a few years, and we've plugged him into our number 3 starter role. So hopefully he's a good replacement for this season for Mr. Manaea. And then hopefully the combo of Miller, Schmidt, and Chandler could be solid for us at the top of our rotation for the next couple of seasons. We also brought up Domingo Germán from AAA and David Peterson from AAA. And we picked up the veteran Justin Topa in one of the trades that we made. So 4 new pitchers on our pitching staff with those departures of Hamilton, Spire, Spores, and Manaea that I mentioned. Honestly, the big changes to the lineup primarily happened 4, 6, 8 weeks ago when we made some of those earlier trades that I've talked about. Cameron Cawley continues to hit very well since he came back from his injury, hitting .333 with a 134 WRC plus, stolen 4 bases for us. Really like the glove, really like the speed. Question is still what the bat ends up being. I don't think it's a 134 WRC plus player, but if he can be a bit above average offensively when all is said and done, with everything else he brings to the table, he could be a pretty useful player. Jake Bowers is up with us in the majors now. Certainly not part of our long-term plans, but with the move of Santander, he is in the lineup against right-handed pitching. And then Max Muncy is back from the minors as well. But as I noted, the changes to the everyday players were much less significant over the past week or so when we've made all those trades that we talked about, primarily focused on our pitching staff. And when this season began, the projection was that we would lose 101 games. I really don't want to lose 100 at this point at 42 and 62. We're just on pace to avoid 100 losses. That being said, we've also likely got the worst team on the field that we've ever had this year with the moves that we've made. So it's conceivable that we may play a bit worse over this final 2 months of the season. I'd love to get this team to 70 wins, but that's going to require going 28 and 30 or better the rest of the way, which is definitely a long shot. So it may be more realistic to avoid the 100-loss season and hopefully get somewhere in the mid to high 60s in wins. And I think at this point, if we got to 66, 67 wins with this team, while it's undoubtedly a bad season, it's probably realistically about the best that I think we can hope for with the squad that we've got left. And the first week or so of August has gone about as you'd expect for this team. We lost our first 4 games of the month to push our losing streak to 6 games. Lost both series to Seattle and Texas in sweeps. And then somehow inexplicably took 3 out of 4 at home against Tampa. So we're 45 and 67 as we sit here on August the 8th. And we're continuing to play about 400 ball, as you can see, still in last place. But we get one of those messages that you can only get in OOTP. Or I guess to be fair, you can probably get in sports today when players have very highly inflated opinions of themselves. But Tyler Mahle's patience is running low. He's angry that he's not in a starting rotation. Please consider trading me to a team where I could get what I deserve. Well, we're 12 days past the trade deadline, Tyler, so I know in addition to your anger and your lack of patience, you're not very good at math and probably not all that smart. And you've also got a 5.51 ERA, and you've given up 16 homers in 81 and 2/3 innings. You should be thanking your lucky stars that this team is crappy enough that a bum like you actually has a job, you clown. And I apologize in advance to the real Tyler Mahle. I'm sure you're a lovely person and a fine baseball player. And it ended up being another below average week for a well below average team with a 3-4 record. That said, despite the team's struggles on the field, Lawrence Butler was named the AL Player of the Week. 520 average with 3 homers. Unfortunately, the rest of the season has not gone quite that way, hitting .246, 15 homers, and 48 ribbies. Butler is a guy that we signed early to an extension. Honestly, with that latest surge, he's gotten his performance up, so he's been a slightly above average offensive player this year. With his good not great, but good outfield glove. If he's able to be an above average offensive player, he's potentially valuable to a team like Oakland. The question is whether he's going to be the 103 WRC plus player he's been through 2/3 of a season this year, or the 89 WRC plus player he was last year. Not necessarily expecting him to be the 126 WRC plus player he was in 148 at-bats in 2025. And another week in the books, another mediocre result for the A's. We were swept on the road in 3 games in Houston, and then we came back and we swept the Rockies in 3 games at home. We're home against Texas and then at the Dodgers before starting off a series on August 31st, the final day of the month in Arizona. That's a pretty rough schedule for us. If we could somehow get out of these last 7 games with 3 wins, not a great result, but I think I'd probably sign up for that against the Rangers and the Dodgers primarily. And we've made it to September roster expansion, where hopefully we can get some help to get this team pushing towards the mid-60s in wins, 53 and 79. So we're still on pace to just barely avoid a 100-loss season. I'd love the loss total to be closer to 90 than 100 when all is said and done. But my hope that we might be able to go 3-4 over the last 7 games of the season proved to be just that. A wistful hope, but we lost both series to the Rangers and the Dodgers before losing the first game of the series to the Diamondbacks. So we ended up 2-5. As we sit here on September 1st, 30.5 games out, 53 and 79, and we are the second worst team in all of baseball, a mere half game ahead of the Washington Nationals in the race to be the worst team in baseball this year. Of course, with the draft lottery, as long as we have one of the worst 3 records in the game, our chance of getting the number 1 overall pick is still the same. So we can certainly do hope that we win more games and play better down the stretch, because it's pretty unlikely that it's going to impact our likelihood of getting the first overall pick, which could be a really nice asset for us. I say us, assuming I'll still be in this seat next year. Probably no guarantees that that will happen, but would love to be able to pick right at the top of the draft and hope that it's a deep draft with a lot of talent. As we sit here with a month to go in the season, not surprisingly, none of our players showing on the leaderboards. Taking a look at the team statistics, we're actually 3 games worse than Pythagorean expectations, so I guess that's slightly positive. We dipped to 11 and 17 in the month of August after we traded away arguably 4 of our top 5 or 6 pitchers. We've improved to 11th in runs scored, still last in the league in home runs, which is something ownership wanted us to improve upon. We were 14th a year ago in home runs in the AL, so it was pretty hard to not improve upon that, but we are doing the one thing we could do to really follow up that goal as well. And we're mediocre pitching-wise as well, ranking 11th in the AL in runs allowed. Somewhat shockingly, after an 11 and 17 record for the month. We talked earlier about how Butler won the Player of the Week. Clark Schmidt actually was the AL Pitcher of the Month, 5-0 with a 1.24 earned run average. And the young center fielder, Luis Lara, who's taken over for Esteury Ruiz, was named the AL Rookie of the Month, hitting just under 300 with 6 doubles, 2 homers, and 12 ribbies. For the year, he's definitely struggled, hitting just 230, but Ruiz was not necessarily a dominant offensive player, so Lara is cheaper, just as good, if not a little better defensively. Doesn't have quite the same speed, but he is 12 for 12 on the base path, stealing bases this year. And we think that ultimately his bat could be as good or better than Ruiz, although he has only put up a 76 WRC plus thus far here in 2027. And we don't really have a ton of young talent in AAA, unfortunately. We added one pitcher, the veteran Ken Waldachuk. He had been with us several seasons, and we signed him as a minor league free agent this offseason after we were more than ready to move on from him. Hasn't done much for us as a starter in AAA, but as I noted, we don't necessarily have a lot of great options there, especially after the way we weakened our major league pitching staff, and we already have several players who aren't really major league quality up. We also added Josh Naylor, the veteran. Maybe he'll luck into a couple home runs down the stretch. We just signed him to a minor league deal at the beginning of August. He had been cut by the Dodgers organization earlier this year. Austin Gauthier, who's been up with us the last couple of years, also now back as a September call-up. And then the one younger player is Jorge Ruiz, a guy who we picked up right before the trade deadline from the Angels. He will be making his major league debut. Don't know that he's a huge part of our future. Solid glove in the outfield, decent speed, and he makes good contact. But everything else offensively, he's kind of below average. So just not sure how much he's going to hit in the majors. But we'll give him an opportunity to play against right-handers, try to put him in the best situation possible for success here in this final month or so of the season. And we've had a 1-4 start to the month of September, and that's the type of record that is going to get us to 100 losses. We are 9 wins away from avoiding a 100-loss season, but we're 17 losses away from clinching a 100-loss season. And things are going to be a little bit harder. Tyler Soderstrom, oblique strain that's going to keep him out for 7 weeks. He's also got a bruised knee on top of that was certainly less serious, but that will likely end up finishing his season for us. And Soderstrom, after a really nice first year of his contract with us, where he put up a 135 WRC plus, led the team with 27 homers and was second on the team with 82 ribbies a year ago while hitting 291. Batting average dropped almost 50 points to 244 this year. Finishes as pretty much a league average offensive player, 20 homers and 62 ribbies. Looking at our Oakland A's, the 20 homers and the 62 ribbies are still team bests with Mr. Santander gone at this point, but not necessarily the most impressive offensive performance we've ever seen. And we just completed our next week with a 500 homestand, which unfortunately is good for us. We lost 2 out of 3 to the Yankees, but then did take 2 out of 3 against Boston. So we're sitting here in 57-86 on September 13th. 33 games out in the West, long eliminated from playoff contention, obviously. We have the worst record in the American League, and we are now in a flat-footed tie with Washington for the worst record in all of Major League Baseball. And we need to stop the presses. The Oakland A's actually had a winning week. Only a 4-2 record. We split 2 games against Arizona, but then we did take 3 out of 4 on the road against Seattle to begin this long final stretch of the season against divisional rivals. We've got 3 in Texas, followed by 3 in Anaheim, or I guess it is Anaheim, even though they are the Los Angeles Angels now. And then we'll have 3 at home against Houston, and then finish with a 4-game homestand against the Angels. So 14, or actually 13, if I could count games to go. We're at 61 and 88, so we only need to win 2 games to avoid the 100-loss season that we've been dreading. We would have to go a very solid 9 and 4 or better down the stretch to get to 70 wins, which I think will be a pretty difficult feat to us. I mentioned I'd like to finish this year closer to 90 losses than 100, and that's probably right about where we're going to end up. If things go well, we'll be closer to 90. If things go a little worse than we hope over this last 2 weeks of the season, we'll be a little closer to 100 losses. And just to hopefully show that I am not completely heartless when people do complain to me, Domingo Germán, who I had mentioned we brought up right after we made all those trades, did come and complain that he was not in the starting rotation. And he now has a 2.41 ERA over 41 innings pitched, so he was pitching well before he got these last 2 starts for us. We moved J.P. Sears out of the rotation. He was an all-star for us a year ago. Pretty rough year this year, 6-15 record with an ERA of over 5. He still could be back with us next year, but given that his arbitration number is about $6 million, would think that the 31-year-old Mr. Sears may be somebody who will continue to try to move on from in a trade if there's any opportunities. There wasn't a lot of demand for him before the deadline. But who knows, when we get into the off season and teams have perhaps a bit more financial flexibility, maybe if we decide he's not going to be back with us next year at that kind of number, we'll be able to package him and likely some other pieces in a trade to maybe bring onto the system another mid-level kind of prospect. And these A's are somehow inexplicably playing their best baseball of the season as we're playing out the string here in mid to late September. We took 2 out of 3 on the road in Texas, and then we swept a series on the road against the Angels. I actually lied to you a little while back when I said we were out of the playoff race, although in practical purposes we weren't actually technically eliminated until 6 days ago, because the third wild card team in the American League is not necessarily going to be a great team. You can see right now there are 3 76 and 80 teams who are tied for that third wild card spot. So definitely a bit top heavy in the AL with teams like the Orioles, the Red Sox, and the Mariners all in contention to win 100 games. But a lot of mediocre and poor teams after that. 7 games to go. We're 64 and 90, or that we're not 64 and 91. We're out of last place. We're 66 and 89. So 4-3 record would actually get us to 70 wins. I acknowledge that's not a great achievement, but we've been over 70 every year that we've been running with this team. We were projected to go 61 and 101. So if we could get to 70 wins after the awful start we had, the awful projections that there were out there for this team, and the fact that we traded away many of our most talented players, particularly on our pitching staff, certainly not going to throw a parade, but I'm also not going to be completely humiliated by that type of effort. And it's too little too late for this ragtag bunch of Oakland A's, but we did take 2 out of 3 against Houston, so that now marks how many series wins or ties in a row. We won the series against Boston, we split with Arizona, we won the series against Seattle, we won the series against Texas, we won the series against the Angels, we won the series against the Astros, and now we're up 1-0 in a series against the Angels for the final series of the year. 3 games left, 69 and 90 is the record. So we can get this team to 70 wins. Only need to win 1 more, and we're certainly going to be closer to 90 losses than 100. So given that 100-loss season was certainly in play when we started this episode, and even just 2.5, 3 weeks ago, I guess it's good that we're more competitive now. Standings wise, we're guaranteed to not be in last. We could actually get up to third. Our 434 winning percentage is still the second worst in the AL, better only than the Angels. And we are also better than the Nationals. So finishing third, as I noted, still gives us or third worst. Not that there's a guarantee that we're going to finish third worst, because we certainly could get past the Yankees or the Rangers at this point, who I was talking about before we played that series against that week when we were playing the Rangers and the Dodgers. I was talking about the Rangers like they were still a pretty strong team, which they are not. The Dodgers, not surprisingly, still are a strong team. But we'll see where we end up. I mentioned the draft lottery, and 16.5% chance for those three worst teams to get the number one pick. So I guess in theory, I'd rather be the third worst team in baseball than the worst team in baseball when all is said and done, especially because it's not going to impact the number of ping pong balls we have in the hopper, at least not for the number one overall pick. And in another piece of nutty news, Clark Schmidt just won American League Pitcher of the Month once again. 5-0 record with a 2.11 ERA this month, and all of a sudden he's put together a pretty solid season, 13-11 with a 3.77 ERA. But when you consider how well he's pitched over the last couple of months, that tells you what a rough start he has to this season. He has been 10-0 in August and September. Had a nice April, but his May, June, and July were all brutal. A combined 1-9 record in May, June, and July, with an ERA of probably pretty close to 6. And we ended up sweeping that final series of the year, the 4-game homestand against the Angels. So we finished at 72-90. So when you think about how horrible this season was and how bad the projections for this team were and what we ended up doing, still not great by any stretch of the imagination. You can see 72-90. We're in the red. It's the worst record that we've had in these 4 years, but we've been, when all was said and done, in a pretty tight band between 72 and 80 wins each of these 4 seasons. We actually got up to third place, so that means we cost ourselves a better chance at the number one overall pick in the draft, because we did get by the Rangers as well as the Angels, and obviously still have a better record than the Nationals as well. So the 4th worst record in baseball. When all was said and done, we were only 7 games out of the wild card spot, which, given, as I said, we were thinking we could possibly lose 100 games not that long ago, is not horrible. Not good, but not horrible. Brian Rincon, the youngster, has an active 16-game hitting streak that was the longest in the American League this season, that will carry over to next year. But the year is finally over for the A's. Really a strange season. Somehow went 19-11 in September and October to salvage, again, a not horrible season. Right in line with Pythagorean expectations at 72-90 when all was said and done. Interestingly, exactly the same record, 36-45 at home as on the road. Certainly wouldn't be expecting these A's to have a particularly strong home field advantage. Finished 13th in runs scored, last in the league in home runs. Pretty middle of the pack in terms of base running. 3rd in defensive efficiency and 6th in zone rating. ended up 11th in runs allowed. So the pitching, which had been I don't want to say a strength for us relative to the league, but it has been the strength of our team through the first 3 years of this playthrough. Not as much a strength this year, although I guess if you're 11th versus 13th in terms of runs allowed versus runs scored, by the definition of grammar, it was our strength once again this year, but hopefully it will be even stronger next year. A weird season. Got off to that really bad start in April, May, and then particularly June. But then from July on, we were shockingly an above 500 team. Not way above 500, but we were above 500 from July on. And particularly from August on is when we had a lot more young players getting more significant playing time. So I don't know what to say. I think we'll keep our job. I guess we can see what ownership thinks. It looks like the 72-90 record with the 500 goal is still in the red, unfortunately. As we talked about, we regressed in homers. We improved fan interest a little bit. Somehow our farm system has dipped to 24th rated overall. When we checked in on this, I believe towards the end of last episode, we were ranked 6th. So I don't know exactly what happened with that. But that's certainly not good. You can see in this ranking we're 10th overall by prospect ranking, 10th overall by current rankings. Oh, that's just changing those. We're 10th overall. So I don't know. That's a little disappointing. We'll talk about all of our prospects and how the top prospects did in the upcoming episode, but the season certainly could have been worse. Certainly not great. But as I said, when all was said and done, the fact that we got over 70 wins again, got to 72-90, makes me feel less horrible about this season than I was feeling at the beginning of the episode. That said, I don't really know what we're going to accomplish with this team the next season or two. My goal is just to keep my job until the players that we've picked over these first 4 drafts and first 3 IAFA periods start getting close to major league quality and being able to help us and maybe give us a better pool of young players than Oakland started with, that we can try to build something resembling any little bit of respectability around. Don't know whether that'll happen or not, but that's certainly the hope, and we'll find out in our next episode what happens in the playoffs when we review our roster, take a look at some of our top prospects, and take a look at some of the top prospects around baseball. And we'll also be simming through the end of the playoffs to find out who the World Series champion is this year. And then after that, we'll find out whether we still have a job and what our budget might look like for 2028, assuming we do have a job. When all was said and done, with some of the money that we brought on through trades that we made, was able to put a bit more into scouting and player development as the season went along. We also didn't spend as much in the draft, so we're going to end up delivering a profitable season to Mr. Fisher, which, after how things went a year ago with that modest loss, should make the penny pincher a little happier. So hopefully a profit for the penny pincher, along with the fact that lenient patience hopefully means he'll have a longer leash with us, will mean that when all is said and done, we'll be back in this hot seat next season as well. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.